In a galaxy where chaos was as common as stardust, Korr, a diminutive warrior with a knack for disaster, had earned his nickname, Korr the Tiny. His downfall was legendary, tripping over his own feet and landing face first into a ceremonial pie at a crucial peace negotiation. Now, mocked across the universe, Korr found himself exiled and alone. Enter Captain Alex Carter, a sharp-witted former diplomat turned soldier. She saw potential in Korr's missteps and recruited him for a mission that would either redeem him or cement his status as the galaxy's biggest joke. Korr, the tiniest warrior of Thaler, stood on the brink of redemption. The Grand Hall buzzed with anticipation as alien dignitaries and warriors gathered for the peace talks. Korr adjusted his ceremonial armor, which seemed to swallow his diminutive frame. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. Today was his chance to prove himself. As the council convened, Korr couldn't help but feel the weight of their stares. He stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Honorable leaders, we stand here today," an insect buzzed near his ear. He swatted at it, losing his train of thought. The persistent little pest zipped around his head. "Korr, focus," he muttered to himself, trying to regain his composure. He continued. To discuss peace between the insect returned, this time diving straight for his nose. Korr jerked back, tripped over his own feet, and crashed headfirst into the table. The room fell silent. A lone pie, meant for the Zogonian ambassador, sat perfectly aligned at the edge of the table. As if in slow motion, Korr's face collided with the pie, sending custard and fruit flying everywhere. The Zogonian ambassador, a stern-looking reptilian creature, blinked in shock, wiping a dollop of cream from his scales. Laughter erupted. Warriors and dignitaries howled, clutching their sides. Korr, now covered in pie, sat up, wiping the mess from his eyes. His cheeks burned with embarrassment. He glanced at the Thalarian High Council, whose faces were a mix of disbelief and suppressed laughter. "Nice move, Korr. Maybe next time you can juggle some pies too," sneered Theryx. "This isn't the end for me," Korr whispered to himself, but the words felt hollow. The peace talks dissolved into chaos. The Zogonian ambassador stormed out, the negotiations in tatters. Korr's heart sank. This was supposed to be his moment of glory, and instead, he had become the galaxy's laughingstock. By the end of the day, the High Council had made their decision. Korr was to be exiled. He packed his few belongings, each item a reminder of his failed attempts at greatness. The journey to the spaceport was long and lonely. As he boarded the transport ship, he took one last look at his home planet. "Maybe I am a joke," he muttered, slumping into a seat. The ship's engines roared to life, lifting him away from everything he knew. His mind replayed the incident over and over, the laughter ringing in his ears. Exiled and disgraced, Korr drifted through space, hopping from one dingy space station to another, trying to forget his shame. Captain Alex Carter stormed into the dingy space station bar, her boots clanking on the metal floor. The air was thick with the scent of alien ale and despair. She scanned the room, her eyes landing on the tiniest, sorriest figure slumped at the bar. Korr, the infamous pie-faced warrior, was drowning his sorrows in a drink that looked suspiciously like swamp water. She approached him, her presence imposing despite her average height. "Korr, I presume," she said, her voice cutting through the bar's din. Korr looked up, bleary-eyed and disheveled. "Who's asking?" he mumbled, barely lifting his head. "Captain Alex Carter." "I've got a proposition for you," she said, taking the stool next to him. Korr snorted. "Unless it involves a time machine to erase my embarrassment, I'm not interested." Alex smirked. "I need a warrior. Someone who can get the job done without being noticed. And I think you're the perfect size for the job." Korr glared at her, his pride stung. "Is this a joke? Do you have any idea who I am?" "I'm Korr the Tiny, the galaxy's biggest punchline." "Exactly," Alex replied, leaning in. "You're underestimated, overlooked. And that's exactly what we need for this mission." Korr took a long swig of his drink, considering her words. "What's the mission?" "Peace talks on Zogonia. The planet's on the brink of war. and we need someone who can slip under the radar. Someone who knows how to handle themselves despite their size." "Why me?" Korr asked, suspicion creeping into his voice. "Because I see potential in you," Alex said, her tone sincere. "You've got more to offer than you realize. Plus, I hear you're quite the pie juggler." Korr couldn't help but chuckle at that. "All right, Captain. You've got my attention. What's the plan?" "We head to Zogonia, keep things light, and use your unique skills to our advantage. Think you can handle that?" Korr sat up a bit straighter. "I can handle it. But let's get one thing straight. I'm doing this to redeem myself, not for your amusement." "Fair enough," Alex said, extending her hand. "Welcome aboard, Korr." As they left the bar, Korr felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was his chance to make things right. The journey to Zogonia was filled with Alex briefing him on the situation. The planet was a mess of factions and feuds, and they'd need every ounce of cunning and luck to pull this off. "Remember," Alex said as their ship approached Zogonia, "keep it light, keep it funny. We're here to make peace, not war." Korr nodded, his nerves a mix of excitement and fear. "I've got this," he told himself, trying to muster confidence. "Just another day in paradise," he muttered, his determination growing. Little did he know, his journey to redemption was just beginning, and this time there would be no pies in sight. Korr and Captain Alex Carter stepped off their ship into the chaotic weather of Zogonia. The torrential rain soaked them immediately, followed by a sudden hailstorm that pelted them with ice. Korr, barely reaching Alex's knee, grumbled as he clung to her boot to keep from being blown away. "Welcome to Zogonia, the armpit of the galaxy," Alex said, her tone laced with sarcasm. She bent down, scooping Korr up and setting him on her shoulder. "Hang tight, Tiny. Let's show these jokers what we're made of." Their first peace meeting was set in a grand hall, the walls adorned with banners from various factions. The leaders of Zogonia were an eclectic mixed-scaled reptiles, furry giants, and slimy amphibians, all eyeing Korr with barely concealed amusement. The room fell silent as Alex introduced them. "This is Korr of Thaler, my esteemed colleague," Alex announced, her voice firm. "We're here to facilitate these peace talks." A snicker echoed through the hall. Korr took a deep breath, stepping forward. "Honorable leaders, we are here to—" A loud buzz interrupted him. Korr swatted at the insect, losing his balance and falling flat on his face. Laughter erupted, the dignitaries roaring at his expense. Alex rolled her eyes and stepped forward, her voice cutting through the laughter. "He's just testing the floor's durability," she quipped, the room erupting in renewed laughter. "Now, if we're done with the comedy hour, let's get down to business." Korr scrambled to his feet, his cheeks burning with embarrassment. He glanced at Alex, who gave him a reassuring nod. "Right," he muttered, dusting himself off. "As I was saying, we're here to discuss peace." The meeting continued, though the leaders barely hid their amusement. Korr felt their eyes on him, every mistake magnified. During a heated debate, Korr saw an important document slip off the table and under a chair. Seizing the opportunity to redeem himself, he dove under the table to retrieve it. "Now what's he doing?" one leader sneered. Korr emerged triumphantly, holding the document high. "Found it," he exclaimed, but not before noticing a stash of contraband hidden under the chair. He held it up, the room falling silent. "What's this?" Alex said, taking the contraband from Korr. "Looks like someone's been playing dirty." The leaders exchanged uneasy glances. The discovery shifted the power dynamics, giving Alex and Korr the upper hand. Alex used the moment to press forward, outlining the benefits of peace and the consequences of continued conflict. After the meeting, Alex patted Korr on the back. "You did good, Tiny. Your clumsiness just might be our secret weapon." Korr grinned, feeling a surge of confidence. "Glad to be of service, Captain. Let's hope my luck holds." Despite the rocky start, Alex's strategy began to bear fruit. Her sharp wit and Korr's unexpected discoveries had shifted the momentum of the talks. They spent the evening strategizing in their quarters, Alex pacing while Korr sat cross-legged on the table, nibbling on a piece of alien jerky. "We need to keep the pressure on," Alex said, her eyes flashing with determination. "Humor and unexpected moves. That's our angle." "Right, because my life's a joke," Korr muttered, but there was a hint of a smile on his face. "Hey, embrace it. You've got a knack for turning disasters into victories," Alex replied, tossing him a datapad. "Tomorrow, we hit them with everything we've got." The next morning, they entered the grand hall with renewed confidence. The leaders eyed them warily, clearly unsure what to expect next. As the debates raged on, Korr slipped away from the main table, his small size allowing him to move unnoticed. Korr crawled under the table, listening intently to the leaders' conversations. He spotted another document that had slipped off and was wedged between two chairs. As he reached for it, his hand brushed against something cold and metallic. Curious, he pulled it out to find a hidden cache of illegal weapons. "Bingo," he whispered, stuffing the weapons into his bag. Crawling back to his seat, he handed the bag to Alex under the table. "Look what the cat dragged in," he whispered, his eyes gleaming. Alex peeked into the bag and grinned. "Nice work, Tiny. This will tip the scales." During a particularly heated argument about territorial rights, Alex stood up, holding the bag aloft. "It seems some of you have been playing a dangerous game," she said, emptying the contents onto the table. Gasps and murmurs filled the hall as the leaders stared at the weapons. Alex used the shock to her advantage, launching into a passionate plea for peace. "We cannot move forward if we're constantly looking for ways to stab each other in the back. It's time to end this madness." Korr watched as the leaders began to nod, their hostility melting into cautious agreement. The discovery of the weapons had shaken them, and Alex's speech had struck a chord. As the session ended, several leaders approached Korr, their expressions begrudgingly respectful. "You've got guts, little warrior," one said, clapping Korr on the back so hard he nearly toppled over. "Thanks," Korr replied, trying to steady himself. "Just doing my job." Back in their quarters, Alex and Korr celebrated with a modest meal. "You were brilliant today," Alex said, raising her glass. "Couldn't have done it without you, Captain," Korr replied, his cheeks flushing with pride. "Don't sell yourself short," Alex said with a wink. "Your clumsiness is a damn asset." Korr laughed, feeling more confident than he had in years. "Let's hope it keeps paying off." As they prepared for the final day of negotiations, Korr felt a new sense of purpose. He was no longer the butt of jokes. He was a key player in a mission that could change the fate of Zogonia. And for the first time, he believed he could do it. The next morning, the sun rose on Zogonia with a rare clarity. The grand hall was abuzz with a cautious optimism as the leaders assembled. Alex and Korr entered, heads held high. Korr's newfound confidence was palpable, and even the staunchest skeptics couldn't help but notice the shift. The final negotiations were intense, with each faction presenting their demands and grievances. Alex deftly navigated the treacherous waters of interstellar politics, while Korr kept a watchful eye on the proceedings. His small stature allowed him to pick up on the subtle cues and whispered conversations that others missed. At a critical moment, one of the more aggressive leaders, a towering reptilian with a voice like gravel, challenged the legitimacy of the peace talks. "How can we trust these proceedings when we've been deceived before?" he snarled. Korr, feeling a surge of courage, stepped forward. "Trust isn't given, it's earned. And today, we earn it by proving our commitment to peace." He pointed to the weapons they had uncovered. "These were meant to keep us divided, but we're stronger than that. Together, we can overcome any obstacle." The hall fell silent as the leaders absorbed his words. Alex seized the moment. Korr is right. We've seen the worst of what distrust and deception can bring. Now, let's show the galaxy the power of unity. One by one, the leaders began to nod. The discussions continued with renewed vigor, and by the end of the day, a fragile but hopeful agreement was reached. The factions agreed to a ceasefire and the formation of a council to mediate future disputes. As the leaders signed the agreement, Korr felt a swell of pride. He had done it. He had turned his greatest embarrassment into a triumph. Alex stood beside him, her smile a beacon of encouragement. "We did it," Korr said, his voice choked with emotion. Alex squeezed his shoulder. "No, Korr, you did it. You turned the tide." The final day of negotiations dawned with a rare calm on Zogonia. The sun peeked through the clouds, casting a warm glow over the grand hall. Korr and Alex arrived early, prepared for anything. The leaders filed in, their expressions a mix of anticipation and wariness. Today would decide the fate of their planet. Korr took his place beside Alex, feeling the weight of the moment. He adjusted his armor, determined to make this day count. As the debates began, the atmosphere was tense. The stakes were higher than ever, and every word was scrutinized. Midway through a particularly heated argument about resource distribution, Korr noticed a familiar insect buzzing near his head. He swatted it away, but it returned with a vengeance, diving straight for his nose. Korr's hand shot out, and in his haste, he knocked over a tray of pies meant for the delegates. Pies flew through the air in slow motion, and Korr's eyes widened in horror. "Not again," he muttered. Thinking fast, he leapt onto the table and started juggling the pies, trying to prevent another disaster. "This is how we celebrate peace on Thaler," Korr shouted, his voice dripping with forced cheer. The room fell silent, then erupted in laughter. The sight of the tiny warrior juggling pies was too much for the stoic leaders to handle. Alex seized the moment. "While Korr entertains, let's get down to the real business," she said, her voice commanding. "We have an opportunity here to create a lasting peace, but it requires trust and cooperation." Korr continued his pie-juggling act, sweat dripping down his forehead. He glanced at Alex, who was presenting their final proposal with fervor and eloquence. The leaders, disarmed by the humor and earnestness, began to listen more intently. One by one, the leaders voiced their agreements. The Zogonian ambassador, who had been the most resistant, stood up. "If this tiny warrior can juggle pies to keep us from tearing each other apart, perhaps we can find a way to juggle our differences." Korr's arms were aching, but he managed a grin. He carefully placed the pies back on the tray, breathing a sigh of relief. "Thank you," he said, bowing slightly. "Let's make today the start of something new." The room buzzed with agreement, the tension dissolving into a hopeful energy. Alex finalized the peace agreement, her hands steady as she signed the documents. The leaders followed suit, each signing their commitment to peace. As the session concluded, the hall erupted in applause. Alex and Korr exchanged a triumphant look. They had done it. Korr's clumsiness had turned into an unexpected advantage, and Alex's sharp mind had steered them to success. Back in their quarters, they celebrated with a modest feast. To Korr, the pie-juggling hero, Alex toasted, her eyes sparkling with pride. Korr laughed, raising his glass. And to Captain Alex, the brains behind the operation. As they clinked glasses, Korr felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He had redeemed himself, proving that even the smallest warrior could make a monumental difference. For the first time in a long time, he felt truly proud. "I think this is the start of a beautiful partnership," Alex said, smiling. "Damn right," Korr replied, his voice filled with newfound confidence. "Let's see what else the galaxy has in store for us."